So,
Yeah,
welcome to Northern Powerhouses, our business success stories series of interviews, where we discuss with local business leaders their backgrounds, their successes, their challenges, and what's really driving them forwards. And this morning, I'm delighted to have with us Adam Glen, who's CEO and co-founder at Unicorn Biotechnologies. So, firstly, Adam, thank you so much for spending some time with us. And if you'd like to introduce yourself, Unicorn Biotechnologies, what you do, how you help people, that'd be wonderful.
sure. I'm sure everyone says this, but thank you very much for having me.
Very welcome.
Um, yeah, so what we try to do, I'll try and explain it as simply as I can, is lots of things are invented in labs in small dishes by humans that move those liquids around.
Yes.
We are trying to build, or we are building machines that will help translate those discoveries into producing things of use for mainly the life sciences sector. So it's
Yep.
all around cell biology and machines. And then we mix in, I'm going to use a buzzword, some machine learning to help us do that at the same time. So that's basically what we do at Unicorn. And then did you want me to talk about me, how I got into this, and things like that?
Yeah, maybe just sort of a bit of a history looking backwards, how you got into business and why this particular one for you.
So, okay, I'll go back to front without giving you my life history. I did a PhD in cancer research because 10-year-old me wanted to, sounds ridiculous, cure cancer. My granddad, unfortunately, who I was very fond of, passed away from cancer. So that
Wow.
drove me down the scientific route from
Wow.
quite a reasonably young age.
Yep.
Um, you do a PhD, and it's both intellectual and vocational. You need, dexterous motor skills. You spend a lot of time in the lab, moving liquids around, and over time, it sort of dawned on me that this wasn't the most sort of effective and efficient way to do things. I then went and worked for a major pharmaceutical company and discovered that they also do this in a similarly unautomated and unscaled way. So it was a
Yep.
personal pain point of mine. Another reason was I spent the better part of a decade of my life every weekend coming into the lab to feed cells. So this is where you replace the nutrients that cells grow in. And you
Yes.
start to
Okay.
go, is there not a better way to do this? So I may have built a lab in my garage to start working on this, because why not? And
Wow.
I'm a hobbyist engineer. So all the
Okay.
engineers in our company, I'm not a trained engineer. If I'm a trained anything, I'm a trained scientist.
Okay.
But I started, so there was things that happened, 10, 15 years ago. 3D printers, the patents on them expired, and a lot of people then started building homemade 3D printers. So that was
Yeah.
point number one. So I built one of those. And the other one was the Raspberry Pi came out.
Yes.
Massive fan of Raspberry Pi. I didn't
Yep.
really get Arduino, and I don't know why, other things that engineers use, but the Raspberry Pi just made more sense. It was Python based. It's sort of feels like real language. It's not like curly
Yep.
brackets and things like that. So those two things happened, and I thought, well, why don't I start building some scientific kit? So that's basically what I started doing in my garage. And then you see this crop up again and again, and eventually I sort of worked in some startup companies myself, and eventually you go, well, no one's there are a few other people that are working in the space, but no one's really building it, so I should
Yep.
build it. So that's basically how it that we came about. I met my co-founder on an accelerator called Entrepreneur First, which is they have a base in London and San Francisco and places like that.
Okay.
So that was a part catalyst as well, because it kind of
Yep.
introduced me to a world that I wouldn't say I wasn't aware of. So um, I'd worked in sales, I'd worked in businesses, but I'd never founded officially a business before. I'd always done entrepreneurial things, but basically, if you mix all that together, that's basically how we came about. So, personal pain point that's shared by industry as well. And then, yeah, well, that's how we ended up here.
Amazing. What an amazing story and what an amazing reason to start. I one of the most important things I believe for every business to have is purpose and vision. And
Yeah.
what a great purpose. Amazing. That's
Yeah, I sometimes I've been fortunate to give a couple of talks to like people at the Royal Academy of Engineering and stuff, and It's the Japanese concept of ikagi. You've
Yes.
got your reason to be, and then you've got obviously there's a market, and there's got to be a solution. There's got to be a problem you're solving, and there's got
Yep.
to be a buyer in that.
Yep.
But if you combine those three things, yeah, it's hard work, but it makes for an interesting life, and
Yeah.
is it makes me happy overall to try and do these things. But it's not necessarily the easiest journey in the world, but I think
Yeah.
it's worth it.
Yes. I don't, yeah, I rarely do I believe that any journey that is easy delivers amazing value, if that makes sense, personal value.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
I honestly don't believe that the idea that, if it doesn't kill you, it's character building, all that sort of. There's an element of crap in some of that, but I think earning things is something that gives us a lot of pleasure in things. So
yeah,
getting through challenges is quite important.
yeah.
Amazing. Oh God, I sort of am a bit taken aback by that, so forgive me for a sec. Um,
That's all.
so so looking back, this journey of the purpose, seeing that there was an opportunity. We talked about Ikigai and you being in the center of that. Looking backwards now, what are some of the challenges you've had to overcome from the point, probably pre-founding this business, but getting into that whole process? What are some of the things that have really challenged you through this journey so far?
I'll start kind of macro and then go
Yeah,
micro.
yeah,
Macro, fear. That's the
yes,
barrier. It
yes,
just is fear of, I think one thing we do terribly in the UK is we are ambitious, but within bounds. We've got a cultural
yes,
kind of, oh, don't take this. It's too risky. It's too big a risk. The risk is not doing it. I mean, venture capital particularly, it's an asymmetric bet. It's saying, if you are right, how big could this be? Whereas we kind of focus on all you have to be aware of the things that can go wrong, but they're not usually the things that kill you. It's something else. So fear, I think loads of us like there's a fear of judgment, there's a fear of failure, there's all these things. And then I don't know, over time I don't know, it's kind of what's the thing? Is It's like the quote, everything popular is wrong, Oscar Wilde.
yeah,
Um, and you've got a fear in you that maybe everyone else is right and you couldn't do this. But actually, a lot of the time is like,
yeah,
well, the other way I look at it is like if you watch kids on a football pitch when they're young, they all run after the ball. All there's like a little
yes,
they you want to step away from the kids that are running after the ball and think what's missing, where's the
yeah,
gap, and should I build something in this space? So yeah, fear's the macro. The micro, what are the challenges we've had to overcome? Um, Notable ones. We banked with a bank called Silicon Valley Bank that collapsed.
right.
That was a that was not a pleasant week of my existence.
Oh my goodness.
I suppose we started in my attic, so we had to figure out where do we build a lab, how do we build a lab. So we've now done that twice. We've converted a nightclub into a biotech facility because why not? I'm actually in it now, and there's spotlights and things. So it's not a standard biotech lab. So I think it's like every week we call it like this wasn't on our bingo card this week. Every week, can guarantee there's some issue that we never would have predicted that comes up
Yeah,
just in the process of starting things up. Hindsight's 2020. Maybe if we'd had more vision, more predictive vision, we could have seen some of these problems. Most of the time, it's not. Other side is getting teams. We are a pretty multidisciplinary team. We've got engineers, scientists. We're trying to commercialize things. Getting that to all work in kind of unison is
yeah,
hard. And as one of my former line managers, I won't quote her in case she's annoyed about this and hears it, but she said to me, Adam, everything is a people problem. To which at the time I said, I was venomously, no, it's a science and engineering problem. I was
right.
wrong. Most things are high level a people problem. So getting people to work together efficiently is way more complicated than I ever imagined it would
Yeah,
be. So it's stuff like that. What other sort of micro problems? Yeah, so my co-founder is American, so he's had to go through the visa process, apply for things like indefinite leave to remain. That's not been trivial.
yes,
So there's a bunch of yeah. Then there's actually building the technology, commercializing it, inventing it, patenting it, selling it. You have to do all those things, and you're doing it all at the same time. It's like it's all like it, there's weeks where you're like, this week I'd just like to get through without something catching fire. And
Yeah.
I'm probably forgetting a bunch of other problems that I can't even remember. So it's there's a lot. It's a lot.
Absolutely. No, I've just reflected on the sort of macro level. I think a couple of things that come to mind was um I truly believe when people say you can't do it, they're actually saying they can't do it. And
Yeah.
I think that's okay. It's okay that you can't do
Yeah.
it. Accept it. That's fine. But please don't overlay your beliefs and fears on me because that's not my job. But the other one is I think you sort of encapsulated what you said. There's a great poem, and I can't remember the author of the poem, but I believe Nelson Mandela quoted from it quite a bit, and it's called "Who Am I to Be Brilliant?" And it basically says, and it basically goes through the process of saying, who am I not to be brilliant? What am I taking from the world if I don't choose to maximize my potential in the world? And
Yeah.
I think that's it's so empowering in times of fear and concern and worry and I you know and but when you've got such a strong purpose, it's like you got to do it. So you just got to find
Yeah.
a way. Amazing.
Yeah, there's a common thing. I don't know. I like other company founders. I like lots of people, but I like other company founders. And
Yes.
there's like a few like traits you seem to see. I'll speak from a disdain, a healthy disdain for authority is one of them. A healthy, a kind of attitude of like, there's something I can't explain. It's like, you have to build it. It's not like you need to build it because it sort of occupies all your thoughts. You have to do it. You're kind of obsessed with it in many ways. And that's if other people, back to your comment, if other people don't want to do these things, that's not a bad thing either because we need people to work in businesses as well. And then so that's
Yes.
great. So it's not a bad thing. It's not that everybody needs to be wired this way or needs to be an entrepreneur or whatever we want to call ourselves. But yeah, it's not a bad thing. So
Yeah.
I've lost my train of thought. Yeah.
No, wonderful. Um, I think it's I've just somebody just sent me over the quote. It's actually the quick poem, if I may, just it might help because it's by a lady called Marianne Williamson.
Mhm.
It's fairly brief. It says our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've heard this quote. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. That yes, yeah, yeah.
It's lovely.
It's in Coach Carter as well, the
Sorry,
film.
that's right. Yes, absolutely correct. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. And
My business partner. I can't remember where we were, in an Airbnb somewhere, and we both shattered because like we'd been, I don't know, fundraising or doing something all day, and we to switch off, we watched Coach Carter and his recommendation because he's American, so he loves Coach Carter. So
brilliant,
yeah,
brilliant.
no, it's good.
No,
It's a good quote.
it's a wonderful quote, and it is, and it really just encapsulates. And I remember first reading it and thinking, yeah, this is turning it on its head. It's like because I believe many people, and I think there's a cultural element. We talked even before we started the interview about this idea of, not blowing your own trumpet and these sorts of things. This is again that sort of cultural thing that tends to restrict people from actually saying what they're going to achieve and how they're going to achieve it and amazing things. So from everything that we've talked through already, what and growing your business, what are the biggest learnings you've had about growing your business? Obviously, you mentioned it to people. It's always going to be a people problem, but what else are some of the key learnings that you've had so far?
I mean, maybe because you mentioned about quotes. What's the quote I'm thinking of? Um, you can go if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I know there's some people don't like the quote, but I quite like it. I
Yeah,
suppose scientific minds generally tend to be a little bit more introverted
yep,
than extroverted, so you have to kind of get used to putting yourself out there.
yep,
So that's been a I wouldn't say it different from me. I've never had a problem per se with it, and I've always stuck out a little bit. During my PhD, I was more outspoken than other people,
yep,
which is not necessarily good in an environment which puts you into, they're like, you're this or you're that, it puts you into certain boxes, and there's a way and a behavior of behaving.
Yep.
So I've got in trouble several times because of it. Not trouble, but yeah. So what there's the human side of business of managing teams. Um, I'm trying to think what else. There's just the like when you're trying to blend science and engineering, particularly science, with market forces, that's pretty hard because science tends to work. Science is like nothing, 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 something. Um, and yes, you can sort of like plan to discover something, let's say, but you don't necessarily know you're going to discover it. And until you fix those problems, you can't sell anything. So from a business perspective, this is pretty horrid. And
Yes.
then
Yes.
engineering, I use this analogy, maybe engineers don't like it. You tend to make something and then iterate it and make it better.
Yep.
But you can't iterate on the candle and expect to get the LED. Sometimes you need to take a different track, and your customers aren't necessarily sometimes ready for that. So
Yeah.
you're having to play this kind of invention game, science game, and then you're trying to also commercialize things and sell it to people who pay real money for a solution to their problem, and it's got to work. And you can't just turn up and be like, oh, it doesn't work. The science is nearly there. That's not
Yep.
really how commercialization works. So when you blend all these different worlds together, that's I think what makes particularly science and engineering businesses really, really hard because
Yes.
money and capitalism doesn't care per se about your scientific problems. People want solutions to their
Yep.
problems. So yeah, those are some of the things. I'm not sure if I've answered the question well, but those are the things that floated into the top of my head.
It's great. I mean, it's different. It's different to what other people had answered for very sensible reasons, and it's a very different business model. And
Yeah,
and I would therefore imagine it takes. I think you mentioned, you might mention investors, but investing in something like this, it is sort of is you're not investing in an asset from day one because it's like you're waiting to create it, aren't you? And there has to be a belief that the process will produce an asset at the end. And
yeah.
yeah. So it's I would guess it takes a different type of person to
Yeah,
engage.
it tends to have a much, I'm going to probably use cliche, but has a longer tail to it,
Yeah.
or the
Okay.
J curve takes. I still
Yes.
think there's opportunity to be still entrepreneurial. I think some of like if you used biotech is equivalent to the word wedding in some senses, where it's instantly more expensive because you say the word biotech. Oh, it sounds fancy.
Yes.
And there is opportunity. I mean, this is partly why we're also, I mean, I'm originally from Scotland, but live in Sheffield. But part of the reason to live in the north, and there's a sort of thriftiness or your, attitude of trying to maximize value for how you do things. And there's
Yep.
sometimes ways like, again, nightclubs, you don't think of them as biotech facilities, you think of them as nightclubs. But when we looked around a place, we saw potential for something else. And you have to
Brilliant.
sort of look round problems. So I think
Yep.
there's still opportunities to be entrepreneurial. And, it doesn't necessarily have to be expensive. It's about how you create a solution that helps somebody in the marketplace.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does take a certain type of investor who believes in your vision that this is the future
Yeah.
is going to be slightly different.
Yes.
And some investors they're more suited to the kind of almost the short-term ROI and
Yes.
seeing more vertical growth. You don't tend to get that so
Yeah.
much in biotech. Sort of, it tends to be. I mean, we work in tools development, which is slightly different. So we are trying to sort of, we're a picks and shovels company. I like technology and I like tools and I like making them.
Yep.
Whereas if you like take a therapeutic company, therapeutics companies have no effectively it's test the therapeutic usually in a clinical trial, and if it works, you win, and if it
Yep.
doesn't, that's it. So that's a very different model to us. But yeah, so it's kind of horses for courses a little bit.
Yeah, no, that it makes absolute sense. And I think you're aware we're a business coaching organization, Adam. I'm keen to know who the
Mhm.
best coaches you've worked with, whether that's business, sport, life in general. Who's had the biggest impact on you?
That's interesting. I'm going to say something that's probably horrible. I don't really use coaches. Mainly, it's not so. I do now a little bit, but I'll explain why.
Okay.
I think it's just because when you do a PhD, and this is maybe this is a downside actually. You get used to relying. You're basically a one, not quite a one-man band, but
Yes.
you're
What about you?
very, yeah, it is in ways. You're trying to do things that you think are kind of useful, but you get used to doing them all yourself. You are everything at once. That's both paralyzing and empowering. And then it's only over time you go, actually, a good coach could help me leverage and maximize whatever potential I have in me. So I don't know, I'm going to sound very middle class now, but I go to a personal trainer in the gym, for example.
Yeah.
Um, Mainly, the main reason I do that is to get my form better. It's not about a little bit accountability, and it's the form. So
Okay.
I think I probably think about business. If you talk about business coaching, it's about improving your form. It's not
Yep.
about like radically necessarily altering you. It's about
No,
doing what you do well, but better. So
absolutely.
yeah, yeah. So that's the only coaching I really use at the moment. But that also fits with my slightly belligerent attitude and towards authority as well. Because I'm kind of like when I go to my PT, I sort of say to him, I hope you realize this is really hard for me to have somebody else tell me what I need to do. So yeah, that's the way I think about coaching now.
Brilliant. No, yeah, it's a great example, and it's a really good point that there isn't a single reason that people will go and adapt. And let's take a PT as a good example. Is a lot of people do for the commitment because it's like I've committed to
Yeah,
turn up at eight
yeah,
o'clock. And
yeah.
but then it is improving. I think the key thing about coaching in general, which is why I asked the question, and I say it is generality. It's not specifically business coaching. Is a coaching approach is asking, not telling. So it's asking what the gaps are because most of us are
Hmm.
self-aware enough to say, well, look, I need to perhaps inform, as an example, I'd like to improve this area. Great, okay. So what are some things we can do? Bringing knowledge and education where it's relevant, but the key thing is it's not about telling you what you should do because, in all honesty, and whether it's PhD background or not, very few entrepreneurial people I've ever met like to be told what to do for anything more than about a second. It just doesn't work. It's like, I mean, I know that myself. It's like, don't tell me what to, I'm not. So I think it's important. And I guess, speaking plainly for me, one of the challenges I have had in building a coaching career is a lot of consultants who do tell, and for good reasons, have rebadged themselves as coaches because that's the buzzword, rather than accept understanding that coaching is about helping people find their way forward, and then where necessary, hold them accountable to do the things they said they were going to do, which in some cases is a lot, in some cases it's not a lot at all. But no, fascinating. No, but the PT is a great example of improving. And I think the key thing is coaches aren't there to be better than the person they coach. They're there to help the person be the best they can be.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I should probably. I don't know if who listens to these podcasts. I don't really listen to podcasts that much myself, but
Cool. That's good.
um, controversial. But like the only other, like the three, I did a program on the Royal Academy of Engineering where there was a coach on that, and that
Yep.
that was useful to difficult. It's useful to a point. I
Yeah.
think one of the hard things with coaching is, oh, hindsight's 2020. You reach a point and you're like, oh, I probably could have done with coaching here in this area because then I
Yep.
wouldn't have made these mistakes. But paradoxically, as a species, I'm not sure the best way, this is how I learn. I learn by doing things. And
Yep.
until I do them, I don't really understand almost like I can have somebody tell me these are the things you should think about. But until you do it, I kind of go, yeah, 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 I'll think about them. And then I do it and go, oh yeah, I really need to think about those. So it's a kind of, yeah, it's a weird paradox. You almost need to have sort of almost, I don't know, temporary coaching where you're like you have it as a kind of prophylactic measure
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
before an event. But what you do and what everybody does is they have an event and they go, well, I should do something about this now.
Yes.
So yeah,
I think, yeah, no, it's great. As I say, the purpose of the podcast is not to promote coaching. It's just, but obviously we are coaches. But I think I think it's being open to the concept that yes, if I learn by doing, obviously the learning is as personal as it can be, but it's not very leveraged. So learning
yeah,
from other people's doing can,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
if that
yeah.
makes
So
sense.
so
It's
you
like,
you want
yeah,
to you want to do it almost. what I found in the past is you want to do it almost at the same, you want to have it all like in the mix at the same time.
Yes.
But the timelines tend to, it's a bit like, so even though I've gone through formalized education systems and stuff like
Yep.
that, I did find them quite frustrating. I found them too structured.
Yep.
Now, other people love that.
Yes.
I don't.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so for some people the structure's fine, but I find that it's like almost like the timings are often off. And you like, let's say, take university for example, or school, doesn't matter. You learn something, and then you immediately forget about it, and then years later you go, it'd be relevant to learn this thing now, not. Yeah, I don't know whether it's my memory's bad or I have more of a RAM capacity where it's if I do it at the time I'm doing it, it's incredibly leveraged, but we as a species tend not to do that, which is quite frustrating.
Yep. No, I really get that. And we sort of mentioned quotes and sayings, and you said I don't you said you have many of them, but any other quotes or sayings other than the ones we've already highlighted that you catch
Yeah,
yourself
so
on a regular basis?
Charlie Munger, show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome.
Yep.
I think there's that quote, and where you stand is where you sit. So kind of your perception on reality is based
Yep.
on sort of your where you like who's around you and your view, like your position. It could be your title,
Absolutely.
your position. So for me, those two quotes, I think this is maybe where I try to think like a physicist. I want like a ground truth that explains everything. And for
Yeah.
me, those two quotes encapsulate people's behavior, so their incentives define their behavior. And the other side of it is like your perceptions of reality are all based on where you are at this given point in
Yeah.
time. And it's only through time that you realize. For example, like, I don't know, every everyone's had a boss they didn't like for some reason. And I've been in the seat where I've been like, this person, oh, what are they doing? They don't know what they're doing, blah, 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 blah. And then you're in the hot seat. And the view's very different from here because you're like, oh no, it's me now that where this authority or decision or consequence falls upon.
Yep.
Very different, very, very different feeling is all I'll say.
Yeah.
So in hindsight, I've gone back to and met up with a couple of people I used to work with, and I've just kind of had lunch with them. I went, really sorry, I didn't realize because I was like probably the person in meetings that was saying, why are we doing it like this? Why are we not doing it like this? I was always kind of pushing and challenging,
Yep.
which is good at some points, and then other points you're like, Adam, you just need to be quiet and go and do what I need you to do. So there's that tension there.
Brilliant. Love it. And you said you didn't really watch podcasts, which is great. But any favorite books you've got on business success or
Um,
just life in general? It's just
Books. I really like. So actually, the book itself is interesting, but it's more the concept. It's called
yep.
One Red Paperclip. It's about a guy who he started with one red paperclip and he started to trade this like he trade it for something else and trade it for something else and trade. It was showing how you can do a lot with very little.
Right.
And the other one I really like is Never Split the Difference. It's
Good stuff.
written about yeah, it's a guy that worked for the it's about negotiating with terrorists.
Yes.
It's an interesting book. I'm trying to think what other books I've read recently that I really liked. Um, yeah, I tend to now read a lot more sort of blog articles and things like that, rather than books. I'll get
Yeah.
interested in an area and then, looking on Reddit and other,
Yeah.
esoteric information sources or Medium blogs or Substack, because there's some really interesting sort of off the beaten track opinions
Yeah.
where you go, you're trying to work out is there any truth in what they're saying, and if there is, how does it apply to what we're doing?
Yes.
So I've moved away a little bit from like just books on a single sort of almost books anchor themselves around a single topic, whereas I want to kind of go across lots of different topics, if that makes sense.
Yes,
But
it does.
the never split difference is a good one. I really like that.
He's an interesting guy. We had him at our national conference a few years back.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, yeah, really interesting, and it's really interesting concept. As you say, his job was was specifically getting hostage back, and it's like it is all or nothing, isn't it? You can't. I always say
Yeah,
you don't really want half a hostage back because that's probably failure ultimately.
yeah.
Um, so so learning wise, what would you say you've learned about yourself throughout your journey, Adam?
Oh God. Hmm. What have I learned about myself? I'm to give myself credit, I'm more resilient than I may have thought I was.
Yep.
I've always been ambitious, but I think I just it's a catch 22. So one thing I wish I'd discovered this kind of, I don't know, whatever you want to call entrepreneurship. I kind of did it as a side. I always had side hustles of something I was doing that was a bit quirky. Always had like, I don't know, I've worked in about 30 or 40 different jobs, mainly temporary jobs, not because I was getting fired all the time. Um, so I always had that in me, but I kind of weirdly, I did my PhD and went, and now I need to have a proper career, whatever a proper career is. And I have to go this to this to this, because that's what everybody else does. And it took me a while to realize you don't need to do that if you don't want to. There's a path you can take that you don't have to follow others on if you don't want to. So I guess, and then doing that, I've sort of gone, oh, okay, it's hard, but it's very hard at some points, but I'm more resilient than I gave myself credit for. But I wish I'd discovered it sooner. Um, I think what else? People management is much harder than I realized. So when I worked in kind of like I sort of managed small teams sounds a bit grandiose. Like if you're a student, if you work in a lab, you're usually, especially in an academic lab, you're usually responsible for a couple more junior people and you kind of
Yes.
help them
Yeah.
technically more than anything.
Yeah.
That's not the same as running a business and
Yeah.
managing people in a business.
Yeah.
They're, it, people call this soft skills, and it really kind of grinds me a little bit because they're not. They're actually some of the hardest skills to learn because it's not something you can just read a book and know
Yeah.
how to. Yes, you can read a book to help you, but managing people, you can't manage everyone in the same way.
Yeah.
Like it just doesn't work. So I think like that element of it, that's not about me, but I think I think I've got better at that. I think delegation maybe as well.
Yes.
Delegation's hard for somebody that's used to marching to the beat of their own drum,
Yeah.
because you've got to cede control and pass it on to somebody else. So yeah, I suppose those things are I'm not sure. They're the kind of things I've learned about, and I
Yeah.
think it's changed. It's changed who I am to a degree.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it makes sense that delegation is a challenge for many people. I mean, from one of two perspectives, or both, which is one is nobody can do it as well as I can, which is the biggest trap so many people fall into. Because that's the
Yeah,
truth. I mean, that can be the truth, but
I,
three people
yeah.
doing it at 75% can do way more than I can do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, actually, that makes me think of a thing that me and my business partner talk a lot about. We're trying to make ourselves redundant, which is an unusual. It's an unusual mentality to have. You do a thing, and then the bar is, and this is not a high bar. The bar is, if you can't do it better than me, you're probably not very good. I know that sounds horrible, but the trick is
All
then
right.
you get something going, you do it, you get it off the ground, and then you hand the baton over to
Yeah.
somebody that's much more probably able to do it. So it's an unusual, like most members of a team don't try to make themselves redundant, but we're trying to do that to grow the business because we only
100%.
have a certain number of hours in the day, and you can't scale
100%.
a business without more people. So
It's the secret to leverage growth and fast
yeah,
growth. And one thing I often say to people is that I think the biggest one of the biggest challenges I help founders through is the idea that we get to a certain level of success, and we can get through to a certain level less with a few good people and sheer blood and guts. Just work really, really, a few great people working really hard.
yeah,
The challenge is, we're brought up on the phrase, if you work hard, you'll be successful, and that's true to a certain level. But if until we start to get into that delegation mindset, then we become the limitation of the growth of the business. Because if
yeah,
it's about us and how hard we work, and we've run out of time, and I know that did it in my first business, then we become the limitation. So interestingly enough, our definition of a true business is a commercial, profitable enterprise that works without its owners.
yeah.
anything else is a job. It might be a well-paid job. It might be a job we love. There's all lots of things. There's
Yeah,
nothing wrong with a job, but it's understanding that a true business should be independent of its owners to free its growth up. If that makes
yeah,
sense. Um,
yeah, yeah.
and it also
Completely agree.
creates a cool place to be because we don't have to work in the business every day. I totally get, your passion for what you do would suggest that it's something that you would want to do, um, but yeah, but without that sort of without that ability. But the great thing is when it works without us, we get to do the cool stuff, and
Yeah.
we earn the right to do the cool stuff because we've done all the hard stuff to get here.
The other thing I know there's certain areas of the business that well, initially we said stupid things like we don't need an accountant, it's just numbers. I know what numbers are. And then I'm like, I don't want to do this ever again. The
Absolutely,
people, the people that do it, that's great. I love them for it, that they will dot the I's and cross the
absolutely.
T's and do everything properly and things like that. I'm not that person. I'm not that guy. And putting me in that position, it was kind of hellish for a period of time. Or, and then I was like, somebody else more competent needs to do this now. So yeah, that's another kind of learning and way I've changed is I'm not trying to do all the as we've grown, we're purposely not getting involved in some of these
Great,
jobs because
great.
we're better off spending our time leveraging our time to do something else. So I think in the beginning you don't realize that, and then hindsight tells you that you should have probably done it sooner. So
Yeah,
those are some of the mistakes we made. Or we looked at other companies and we went, why have they got so many people like managing people? And then you're like, oh,
yeah,
that's why you sort of
yeah.
discover these things as you go.
Brilliant. Yeah, I remember our founder telling us a story, and one of the stages of his personal development was buying and building businesses. He still does it, but at different levels. But one of his rules of buying businesses is never buy a business or even start a business where you can do the work. Therefore, you're never tempted to. So he had a chain of
Interesting.
yeah, a chain of hairdressing salons because he couldn't cut hair. We could never get to a point. He says, "Well, we're a bit busy. I'll pick some scissors up because that would have been a disaster." So it was an
Oh
interesting
yeah.
way of creating that discipline of, I
Yep.
mean, but the flip is most people that start businesses around their passions, and that's right and proper. It's
Yeah.
just getting that early view of creating it works without is absolutely yeah, absolutely crucial.
And the and there's a thing that like I can't remember if it's called the Peter or the Paul principle. You're promoted to the level of your own incompetence.
Yep.
So you do a thing, you learn a trade, whatever it is, and you get very good at it, or you get somewhat good at it so that you are slightly ahead of your peers. And then you go up a management chain usually, and then you get to a point and you're like, if you go no further, you've been promoted to the level of your own
Yes.
incompetence in ways. But yeah, I can see it from both sides. That's an interesting philosophy of you running a business, but you can't work in the business, and that's a purposeful decision.
Because you,
I wouldn't find that impossible, but for me, my journey's come through the
oh
knowing
yeah,
about it is helpful.
it's not it's not for everybody, and it's not a criticism if we don't, because almost every business is started by people that are good at what they do. That's it.
Yeah,
But when we get to a point with our own business, but also when we look at acquisition, if we're looking at other things, is if you can't work in it, then your job from day one is growing it,
yeah,
not doing it.
yeah,
And I think it's a good lesson to learn. He was doing an event years ago, and it was he basically explained the principle that if we value our time as the CEO, as the person responsible for growing the business, whatever, not the person doing the business, the person growing the business, whatever hourly rate that is, if we can pay someone a lower hourly rate to do something that is of a lower hourly rate, we can to free ourselves up to do the high level stuff. That's that's just profit strategy. That's a profit. And
yeah,
he happened to say it was about 500 people in the room, and he happened to say, I haven't cut my own grass for the last 10 years, because that was his common sense. And guy in the middle of the audience sort of took umbrage at this and stood up and said, but Brad, I like cutting my grass. And Brad turned and he didn't mean to be disrespectful, but it was just the first thing he said. He just said, "Well, that's because you haven't got a boat." And the guy went, "Oh, okay." Yeah, and it's like I think the highlight of that is what we've got to be wary of is the bullshit we tell ourselves to justify things that
yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
that
We,
makes
we
sense.
all we all yeah. We talk about that as well. We talk about that a lot. The mental gymnastics we do to justify whatever decision we've made in our own head.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we all do it.
It,
Yeah.
it's interesting. There's a. Are you familiar with the climb event? climb
Yeah,
20 foot.
yeah,
So I think we're likely to be quite a major sponsor of that next year. I've known Gordon for quite a while, Gordon Bateman. But sorry, as an aside, but at that event, I think twice a lady called Jennifer Byrne has spoken or been interviewed on there. She's ex CTO at Microsoft, going back quite a long time. Since then, she's been running a number of startups. But one thing she said a couple of years ago, which I found really it just really hit me, especially for the people I work with, was that she said in the US when they recruit C-suite executives, CEOs, CFOs, whatever they might be, they actively test them on their ability not to do things.
interesting.
And yeah, it's just like I could see every business owner in the room going, "Oh my God, what you're talking about? This is nuts."
Yeah,
But
but it's an inverse selection method. It's a way to see who would prioritize the things that really need to be done versus almost distracting themselves because they could do the thing.
yes, yeah, it's like my
Interesting.
job. My job is not to work hard. My job is to lead a team working hard. That doesn't mean
Yeah,
my job is to be lazy. That's not what it's saying.
yeah, yeah,
It's saying I can achieve more when my sole purpose is leading a great team. So yeah,
yeah.
found that fascinating. The other thing that's fascinating, go back to your point about sort of being promoted to your own point in competence. One of the biggest fellas I've ever seen is we we promote the best person at doing anything to become the manager of that thing. Happens in
Yeah,
sales all a lot, but it happens everywhere. And it's like, well, you're the
yeah,
best at sales, so you be sales manager. Management is its own discipline and profession.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
the best managers should manage sales or whatever, and not necessarily know how to, not even know how to do it. It allows us again not to collude with the people we're managing, going, "Oh yeah, that is hard, isn't it?" It's like, no, but you
yeah.
said, go on,
There's
sorry.
interesting things to do with like leadership and management. Being a good
Yes,
leader isn't being a good manager or vice
they're two
versa. They're
very
they're
different
they're
things.
they're, they're very different things. I
Yeah,
think that I don't know if everyone understands. Again, it's until you've been in that position, you don't really know. But I don't think everyone necessarily understands. There's a difference
absolutely.
between the two. Yeah, it's
We
hard. It's hard though. I can see the argument both ways. One of the downsides of promoting somebody into management who doesn't really know the thing can be that they don't really know the things, so they make kind of slightly uninformed decisions that they then have to pass on to their team. I mean, I suppose it's like football. I don't know. The manager then plays people in the wrong position, and then the team loses. So it can
yeah,
be that way around as well.
yeah, no, you're bang on. The key thing is access to technical knowledge. So it's like
Yeah,
they don't have to have the knowledge themselves as long as they have access to it.
yeah,
And in honesty, when we would do this, so my previous business was software development, software engineering, that sort of thing, and we'd have a project manager that wasn't technically knowledgeable, but we'd alongside them we put a technical lead. So the technical lead
mhm,
would explain the things and say, yeah, that's fair. That, yes, that should take 5 days or 10 days. But the project
yeah,
manager was there to say, look, we've all agreed 5 days. Is it going to be ready in 5 days?
yeah.
And whatever you tell me, I'm not really open to because we agreed at the time it would take 5 days.
Okay.
So please don't suddenly tell me it's going to be 20 days because of this, and this, the things that you could have thought. So yeah, no, it's an interesting point. I think it's just creating it. There isn't any right or wrong, or it doesn't have to be 100% one way or the other. But if we look at things from that sort of polar difference, somewhere in the middle is somewhere effective, and it's okay
Yeah,
to have that healthy friction between
yeah,
you know. Technical and management, it's okay. It's just so that because friction ultimately is energy, and energy is pretty good in general. So,
yeah.
so I'm keen to know what the future looks like for you guys, Adam. It's obviously a fascinating thing that you're doing, and so as you look forward, what does the future look like for you, and what challenges do you think you might face, if any?
So, I mean, we are a team of 10 people, so we're not
Yeah.
massive. We've done not a small amount, an amazing amount with a very small number of people. So we
Yes.
sell products into, I think, every continent now, I
Yeah.
think, almost. And so we operate at the moment. We've got a UK base, but we're building a US base as well. So we have a US subsidiary that's based in New Jersey, and we're looking at some
Right.
other places as well. So challenges for us is like, how do you go from a handful of customers? When I say handful, you're talking of like 15 to 20 key customers or something like that. How do you go from that to hundreds to thousands? that's the challenge in the next bits of us. So yeah, we're obviously um, on that journey.
Yeah,
We have the revenues, we're, things like that. We're making things, we're selling things, we have customers.
brilliant.
So that's the challenge for us is how do we go to the next stages of growth? But I think we're pretty like I know it sounds weird, but the thing we started off with is like because when you're in a startup, there is no structure, but we now have a
Yeah,
reasonable management structure that people
great.
know what they need to do to get things done. We just need to scale that now. And then it's a general challenge for the UK. This isn't a northern thing, this is a southern thing. Um, and people talk about this relentlessly. The reality is the risk appetite of most UK investors is not the same as an American investor.
Yep,
So you get a lot of companies that start here and scale in the US. Also, the US is different. It's demographically different. It's a huge market. Blah
yes,
blah blah blah.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, so it's those kind of they're the things. They're like we make the we do a few things. We don't just make machines, but that's our core business activity. But we
Yeah,
make them like literally next door to me here. But that's fine for a few machines. But how do we make hundreds of them, and then how do we distribute them, and all those
right.
kind of things come into it.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the next thing you're wrestling with right now.
Yeah, yeah. So because the thing is like, I mean, because if you've got a software background, sometimes I think, oh, should we have just done a software business because distribution is kind of baked in.
Yep.
Um, but we cross, I don't know, we call it playing on hard mode for everything. So we cross hardware engineering. We obviously have to do software because we have to control the hardware. And we do science at the same time. So we're basically if we're taking all the hard stuff and doing it in one with 10 people, which is a bit mad. But
Brilliant.
the way I look at it is that like you've got to do hard things because they're in theory incredibly valuable for humanity. So yeah, we're trying to we're scaling in that direction is the plan.
Brilliant. Brilliant. And final question, what would be the best advice you could give an 18-year-old you if you could go back in time and do that, Adam?
Oh, so many things. I don't know. Um, I say this, it's a bit of a cliche quote that I say to my 10-year-old son. I don't sit there and pitch him. It's going to sound like a pitch. Be bold, be brave, be fearless is what I would tell my 18-year-old self. That there's this kind of a how we're brought up, and this is no disrespect to my parents, where I grew up and things like that, but it defines our worldview.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
the one thing I love about people who build businesses and especially speaking to other founders is they all come with their own kind of worldview, and it's often radically different
Yeah.
to mine. I assume that people sort of think like me. I'm kind of glad they don't sometimes, but I assume they think like me. But you go and see enough people, and one thing I like to do is kind of figure out other people's mental models or mental maps of how
Yep.
they think of the world and ask them about that. So yeah, I tell my 18-year-old self is to quite, and I've always done this to an extent, is that the rules you think are in place are not really rules.
No.
They're bendable, and just to go
Yeah.
and do the things. A lot of times when I was younger, I think I sort of, I don't know, step back a little bit because of again fear and all the other things. So that's what I tell my 18-year-old self. Just find a find a way to make things happen.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Love it. Be bold, be brave, be fearless.
Fearless.
Love
Yeah.
it.
I don't know.
Absolutely.
I'm hoping I didn't hear that from. That's something I genuinely think I've made up, but you'll probably find it somewhere on the internet that I've read it and I've just consumed it and said, "Oh, it's actually my knowledge." I think it's a me thing. I think. I hope.
It's all good from my perspective. It doesn't matter. I often say when we talk about business knowledge, business education, most of the best stuff was written in the 1920s and 1930s.
Probably. Yeah.
All's often been done is it be represented, regurgitated for the
Yeah.
for that era, for the era that's relevant to it. So, you know,
Yeah.
James, I
Interesting.
mean, James Clear wrote a great book called Atomic Habits a few years back, and it's a
Yeah.
brilliant book, but a lot of the disciplines you can trace back to previous people like Jim Rohn and various people. So and that doesn't devalue the book because its book is for its time. It was really relevant to bring a bunch of stuff together that was really cool. So I think it's yeah. I just in my personal belief is it doesn't matter whether it's somewhere else. It's what's important to
Yeah.
me. So
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I
Adam,
just don't. I don't like to go. I got a thing about attribution and kind of trying to be as accurate as I can. So that's the scientist in me. I don't want to basically claim credit for somebody else's
okay, yeah, no, I
work.
get that. Yeah,
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 so
yeah.
so
That's the
it could be
scientist thing,
quoted
isn't
to
it?
somebody. I apologize to whoever said it if that's the case. I think it's
that
me, but I don't
that's
know.
that's got to be a science thing, hasn't it? It's like, yeah, you've got to make sure you haven't. Yeah, okay, I
Well,
get
no,
that.
you see, I think I've worked with too many. This is a side note. I've worked with too many people who have claimed a lot more credit than there was work than they should be,
Right.
and
Okay. Yeah.
I like to try and
You want to make
not
sure you're
do
not that.
that. Yeah, yeah. I don't want to be that person, but yeah, I think that's a me quote, but it might
Uh,
not be.
it's funny. I don't know if it's directly related, but it takes you back to there's quite a famous story about a study on setting goals and planning, and it quotes the 19 I get this right, something like the 1957 Harvard Business School group of graduates, and they got them all to sit down and write a 25-year plan and or 25-year set of goals, and they basically they found them again 25 years later, and the story goes that the I think it's something like the 8% of the students that had kept the goals current, relevant, they brought them out. They actually planned and created a living plan that sort of owned about 90% of the wealth in the room. So there was a quite great correlation. And then it was found, I believe, and again, I'm not telling any of this to be true. This was search it up for yourself. That it was actually told it was actually it was a story. It was like it was made up, but it was a story that just makes sense. If you have goals and you set a plan. And I think it was Brian Tracy, I think, who's obviously quite a significant speaker on success and things, said, well, if it isn't true, it should be. So it doesn't, it doesn't matter whether it was true or not, whether it came from anywhere else. If it's relevant, it's relevant, and I certainly believe that to be true. Adam, it's been fascinating talking to you today, and there's so many different things that I've pulled out from our conversation, and I really thank you for your time today. And for anyone that's watching that would like to get in touch with you or Unicorn Biotechnologies, what would be the best way of doing that?
Probably just my email, adam.glen@unicornb.io. It's probably the best way to get a hold of me.
Brilliant. Well, it'd be great to swing by another 6 to 12 months and just see what the next phases of development are and how well the sort of the scaling in the US has gone. But for now, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, that's no problem.
Brilliant. Thank you.
All right.